For years now, this has been a familiar topic in India's tech conversation. Bangalore is too crowded, too expensive, too stretched. And every few months, there's a new promise that tech jobs will finally start moving out into smaller cities. Most of the time, those conversations stay abstract. They revolve around policy announcements, investment numbers, or lists of emerging hubs that don't always feel very real. But instead of asking where tech should go next, our brilliant colleague, the Ken reporter Mrunmay, asked a simpler question. Where is it already going and why? And what she found was that across states of southern India, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Andhra, Tier 2 cities are being drawn into the tech economy in ways that may not look dramatic but are very intentional. And here's the thing, as these shifts are happening, the comparison is inevitable. Where is Karnataka, home to Bangalore, India's most famous tech capital, in all of this? It is still struggling to translate its ambition for decentralization into self-sustaining ecosystems outside the city. So, today's episode is about just that. What it actually takes to make tech work beyond a single metro and why intent alone hasn't been enough. Which brings us to the real question at the heart of this conversation. How are tech cities really built, and why are some states getting it right while others are not? And to answer that, my co-host Snigdha was joined by the reporter who went out and did exactly that.
Hi, Mrunmay. Welcome to Daybreak.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm glad you joined us. So, really interesting story to start with.
Thank you.
Why don't you take us to where it actually begins? You're in Tirupati. We all know it's a temple town. I would have personally never imagined Tirupati having to do anything with tech. So, yeah, tell us.
So basically, the idea of going to Tirupati came to me when we were discussing the story in our edit meet.
Mhm.
And when I told people that Tirupati has a lot of, has at least a few tech companies, they were very surprised. And that's when I thought I should actually go there and do some ground reporting.
Yeah.
I went there and it's true, it is still very much a temple town. That's the first thing you notice when you enter directions to the really big temple. But you also notice things like a Starbucks. You also notice a Zudio store. You also notice a really big Pantaloons warehouse with a sale going on in it. And you drive a little further in and you see residential projects that have been converted into tech parks. You can see that these were housing societies at one point, and right now actual tech companies and smaller BPOs are operating out of them. And a little further away from Tirupati, obviously, we have the electronic manufacturing segment. So, yes, it is a temple town, but it is also emerging as a secondary tech city.
Right. So, Mrunmay, for someone, who's listening and hasn't really followed this closely, how did India's tech ecosystem end up centered around these very few cities, right? Like Bangalore, of course. And what really changed, over the course of last few years to make decentralization such an important topic?
So this is a question I asked a lot of people in the course of my story, bored them with it really. And for the longest time, especially towards the early 90s to the early 2000s, tech, talent, airports, power, and policy was only concentrated in the so-called big cities.
Yeah.
It was there in Bangalore, in Hyderabad, in Chennai, and Pune. And that was also because a lot of R&D systems were already in place here. And there was a lot of defense manufacturing. So when people wanted to set up IT and software services, it was an easy shift.
Yeah.
Because we already had talented people, we already had power, and we had great land. But as the city started to get a little clogged, as a lot more companies came in, we started facing land shortage.
Right.
The rents increased, the traffics. Anyone who lives in Bangalore
Oh my
knows that
God,
it's a huge
yes.
problem. Also, there was a lot of talent saturation. And this is, I think, because there are really great engineering colleges in other parts of the country as well. I mean, most NITs are in tier 2 towns. It didn't seem reasonable for everyone that they had to study in a great college somewhere and then they had to migrate to a big city to move just because the companies that could afford to hire them couldn't be in their cities. And I
Right.
think that is where decentralization really began.
Hmm.
To get more resources, of course, but to also keep the talent sort of distributed around the country and not just concentrated in certain parts.
Understood. Okay. Okay. Let's go back to your story again, right? Once you stepped out of Tirupati and you began reporting from other cities like Hosur and Warangal, how did you realize that this was not a one-off case? Like, what did you see that was so common across all these very different cities, right?
Okay, so when I take Warangal as an example, Warangal has an IT tower. They're really proud of it.
Hmm.
They have companies like Cyient, they have Tech Mahindra, they have Mauri Tech, and Hosur obviously has a really big EV manufacturing system, starting from Ather, then Ola Electric, TVS Motors. It also has Foxconn. I would say that. These cities may not be echoing exactly what a Bangalore or a Hyderabad or even a Pune feels like, but they are cities which have their own big companies. They are cities which have, if not primary, then at least secondary offices. They have techies, they have the infrastructure required for them, and they have it at a cheaper rate than the big cities.
Right.
So
Makes sense. Okay. Obviously, you spoke to a lot of people when you were reporting for the story. You must have come across many of them who are working in these cities, right? Tirupati, Warangal. I'm very curious to know, what did you think of their lives as professionals there? Like, what does it really mean to build a career outside a big city?
So I spoke to people who were working in Mangalore, and I spoke to people who were working in maybe Warangal. I spoke to people who were working in Tirupati. I think the biggest difference I can see in their lives versus maybe a techie living in Bangalore is that the cost of living is very less, for one. Also, they have a lot more work-life balance. The city is a place where they've already grown up. They have a house there. They have a network already established over there. It's not as cumbersome to travel from one place to another, and they are doing a job they love.
Yeah.
I can see, and there is quite a generational difference here as well, because maybe a person who has just graduated would want to go to a big city like Bangalore or Pune or something to maybe experience it. But what I noticed was that after a few years in people's careers, they did want to go back to their own towns. They did want to settle in a place which they've already known. They
Yeah.
wanted to have a life which was a life along with a career. So that was one big difference I
Makes
noticed.
sense. But so most of these people you met, they were originally from these places. It's not like people from other places around the country are moving to these tier 2 cities for jobs.
In states outside of Karnataka, yes, most of the people I met were originally from Tirupati or Warangal or Hosur. In Karnataka, there are companies which are pushing people to move to tier 2 cities, which I would actually say defies the point of decentralization, because the entire aspect of it was to give opportunities to people who come from tier 2 cities themselves.
Oh, right.
So, yes, these were people who were from these cities.
Got it. And after Tirupati in your report, of course, you talk about all of these states, right? Andhra, Tamil Nadu, Telangana. They're building a network of tech cities rather than betting on a single one, right? What did that idea of a network begin to look like when you were on the ground?
The network honestly looks like a big company headquartered in a main city like Hyderabad or like Vizag, and satellite units of those big companies located in smaller towns around it, basically. I know that in Karnataka, Infosys is sort of trying to do the same thing, where it has a campus in Mysore, it also has a campus in Hubli Dharwad. But the difference I saw state-wise in Andhra and Telangana was that employees in those tier 2 towns were actually, working on very decisive specific functions. And they didn't exactly feel the need to move to a bigger city just to get more exposure, as opposed to some people I spoke to in Hubli Dharwad who maybe wanted to move to Bangalore to advance their career further and things like that.
Right. So let's come to Bangalore, right? From what you observed, what do you think makes it so hard for tech activity to kind of move outside of this city?
Okay, so this is kind of an administrative issue. The other states that I mentioned in my article, they have bodies like TSI Pass. they have SIPCOT, they have Guidance Tamil Nadu. All of these are bodies which actually have administrative powers. They can allocate land to companies, they can develop industrial land by themselves. By contrast, Karnataka has a body called the KDEM, Karnataka Digital Economy Mission. It is mostly of a promotional nature. It doesn't have any powers by itself. Even Karnataka's bodies, which actually have the power to allocate land, they don't really necessarily have an overarching power to, manage the power infrastructure in that place, to manage, maybe water. So every minor decision that a company has to take to establish itself in one place has to be routed through Bangalore. The other companies have district-wise units, which sort of make, land allocation and industrial setup a lot easier.
Okay, got it. Like, can you give us an example of how this works in, say, for example, Tamil Nadu or Andhra Pradesh or Telangana?
I can give you an example of Hosur. So, a founder I spoke to, I actually quoted him in my story.
Yeah.
A founder I spoke to was trying to set up a manufacturing unit in Karnataka, and he wanted to set it up in, I think, Mysore. All right. And the amount of permissions he had to take and the amount of time it took for him to actually find a suitable piece of land, to check if it was actually, legally clear for him to build an industry on it. He said it was a very hectic process. As opposed to somebody, when he tried Tamil Nadu, somebody from the Tamil Nadu government actually approached him, took him to the state, showed him around the different land parcels that were already available. There was electricity there was running water over there, permissions were handled really quickly, and he set up a plant over there already. I think the whole ease of doing business aspect comes into play a lot around here.
Got it. Like, you also mentioned in your story, right? Like how Andhra Pradesh's decentralization works because it played the long game, right? And then it stuck to that. Can you also talk about that a little bit?
So in Andhra Pradesh case, actually, this is the state playing a long game. And it begins all the way in 2014 when undivided Andhra was split into Andhra Pradesh and Telangana.
Yeah.
At that time, there was an agreement that Hyderabad would remain a shared capital for both of those states for a decade. So it knew it was going to lose Hyderabad in 2024, and it couldn't rely on the city to bring a lot of industry and to provide it with revenue in perpetuity, which is why Andhra Pradesh started a state-level nodal agency called APIIC.
Right.
Basically, the firms which come to the state right now get pre-developed infrastructure. Whether it is in Vizag, which has the MedTech zone and the Pharma City, whether it's in Anantapur, whether it's in Tirupati, with its apartment complexes that have now been refurbished into IT parks, with its BPOs. Basically, the setup in Andhra right now is that there is land, there are amenities, and all the companies have to do is come in and establish setups over there.
Wow, that's quite commendable. Right. Speaking of Hyderabad, right? Yeah, so it's been leaving Bangalore behind on a lot of things. For example, a lot of big companies, big tech companies are choosing Hyderabad over Bangalore. Can you tell us about how Hyderabad has established itself as this center of a network of tech cities that you were earlier referring to?
So Hyderabad and Bangalore have always sort of had a competition between themselves. And I would say like up till the late 2010s, maybe Hyderabad was losing out a little bit. But if you can see now, the picture has drastically flipped. Like Hyderabad added about like 41 GCCs over the last year. Bangalore added 30. So it overtook Bangalore for the first time.
Can you tell our listeners what are GCCs in case anybody is not aware?
Okay, GCCs are Global Capability Centers. Imagine a company which has its headquarters abroad. It sets up a unit in India, and that unit isn't really serving Indian customers per se, but it is just serving the customers abroad. All it is doing is establishing a setup over here and employing people from here. That would be a GCC.
All the back-end stuff, basically.
All the back-end stuff, basically, yes.
Got it.
So basically, Hyderabad has a lot of those, and there's Vanguard, there's Netflix, and I'm sure like a bunch of other companies which have been there in the article. I would say that companies are choosing Hyderabad primarily because it costs less to set up there than in Bangalore,
Mm.
even now. I mean, the rates are catching up. It is still a really big city, but that's quite a reason. Also, Hyderabad is at a nodal point in South India where it has a lot of easy connectivity to Tamil Nadu, to Karnataka, even to setups in Pune in central India. So that's a big reason for it. And as I mentioned, in Telangana, there's a huge advantage that the state is working on sort of secondary nodes to the city.
Mm.
The Warangal IT Tower, which I talked about, it has about 30 companies over there, and they're targeting about 25,000 IT jobs there by 2027. There are BPO networks, there are remote serving hubs, there are like local skilling pipelines rather than, very distant campuses with no connectivity to the city. So that's kind of how it's functioning more.
Okay, Mranmay, speaking of that IT tower, you mentioned in your story that it employs a whole bunch of people. Uh, Now, I wanted you to kind of tell us a little bit about the Beyond Bangalore program, which was the Karnataka government's program, right, to decentralize. How does it compare to Telangana, for example?
So the Beyond Bangalore program, basically, the basic difference is that it's an initiative. It's not an authority body, and it's an initiative under the KDM. Its main focus has actually been pushing companies out of Bangalore instead of pulling companies to tier two cities. And I think that's a very big differentiating factor over there. One of the people working in KDM, very off the record, of course, told
Hmm.
me that you can't make Mysore into Bangalore with just an Infosys campus over there. Yeah. So I think right now, while the mandate of the Beyond Bangalore program is very commendable, and while Mangalore is trying to sort of set itself up as a Silicon Coast as opposed to Bangalore being a
Hmm.
Silicon Valley, there are programs happening, there are startups there. It's not like there aren't, but right now it is sort of mostly working as an announcement platform. Like every time a region is accused of being neglected by a politician or something like that, the KDM's Beyond Bangalore announces a program over there. I mean,
Okay.
if you've heard of like Priyank Kharge's speeches, he's from Kalburgi,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
He does talk about developing Kalburgi into a tech hub multiple times. So, but I don't really see a lot of movement over there.
Hmm.
In fact, for this story, when I came up with the idea, there was talk of me going to Kalburgi and checking out the IT scene over there.
Yeah.
And then I spoke to my friends, and my friends all had the same line to say, "Why are you going to Kalburgi? There's nothing on the ground." That's kind of the
So it's all
reputation of
talk.
the place.
Right,
Yes.
right. At towards the end of your story, you kind of realize that this is actually not the first time that India's tried to decentralize tech, right? And you talk about STPI, which was already a system meant to do exactly that. When did STPI enter the story, and uh, you know, has it really worked?
So STPI is actually a central government initiative. It comes under the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, and it was established all the way back in 1991. That's when I think the successive governments started realizing that we have to take IT outside the metros themselves.
Hmm.
They have about 68 centers right now. They are present in tier 1, in tier 2 and tier 3 towns, and they handle a lot of software exports according to their websites. And here's the difference I've seen. Again, I'm not riffing on Karnataka here,
Yeah.
but the difference I can see is that STPI gives you concessions on building IT parks. It gives you exemptions. It gives you duty-free import of hardware under the National Products Policy startups. And the other states have managed to capitalize on it. They have
Ah.
actually set up STPI campuses under various districts. Like, for example, the Tirupati STPI, which I visited,
Hmm.
technically it falls under the Hyderabad STPI, and
Okay.
it works under that node. Now, Karnataka also has STPIs in Mangalore, in Hubli, in Davangere, and in Manipal, and it should have actually worked a lot, especially because Manipal and Mangalore, all of them have really great engineering campuses as well. But in practice, 80 to 90% of the state's exports still come from Bangalore.
Hmm.
So I think you can have central schemes, but you do also need the state to sort of develop infrastructure on them.
Got it. Okay. My last question to you, Ranmay. I think we're kind of running out of time, and I've already kept you. This is beyond work time now. Um, do you think we often misunderstand how tech growth is actually happening in India, because we end up looking at the wrong sort of signals?
So this is something I had to come to terms with while doing the Tech City story myself. And it's even weirder for me because I actually come from a tier 2 city and I still tend to misread signals sometimes.
Right.
So the first thing I did when I went to Tirupati was check out whether it has a Starbucks. Because again, I come with a very Bangalore perspective. And I thought, where else would founders and VCs get together? And there is a Starbucks in Tirupati. It's just 20 minutes away from the Balaji temple. But it's more aspirational than a networking hub. What I saw over there was couples out on dates. What I saw over there was families with a lot of kids drinking mocha frappuccinos overloaded with caramel and on a sugar rush. And there was no laptop in sight.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And the cafes in these cities, the Zudios, the Pantaloons, they are not built to pull in techies from big cities over there. They have all showed up over there because local people are getting better jobs and they are earning more money, which arguably is the entire point of decentralization, right? Like
Yeah.
equitable progress for
Correct.
everybody.
Yeah.
So whenever government officials or even tech leaders talk about building tech cities outside of like metros, they talk about transforming them a lot. They talk about maybe great infrastructure. They talk about, the social vibe of the city. They maybe talk about getting a Bob's bar outside of Bangalore once in a while.
Yeah.
But when I speak to people, to startup founders from Hubli, from Tirupati, from Mysore, all they want is a good job and good money. And I think maybe transforming a city might be the wrong benchmark altogether. We don't need tier 2 to look sparkling. We just need people in tier 2 cities to have jobs.
That's such
In tech.
a great thought to end this podcast on, because one thing that I really personally detest is how all cities end up looking the same, and what you're saying is exactly the opposite of that.
Right. Yeah. So to end where we started with, Tirupati doesn't have to look like anything other than a temple town. It can be a temple town and it can have an IT park.
How
And it
lovely is
works.
that? That's great. Thank you so much for joining, Ranmai, and it was
Thank you for
great
having me.
talking to you. Before we finish, do you want to tell our listeners about your next story that you're working on? Maybe tease it a little bit.
Okay, the next story I'm working on is about voice AI startups.
Ooh. Oh my
Uh,
God, is my job at risk? Am I going to lose my job?
I definitely hope not, because
Oh
if
my
your job
God.
goes, my job goes, and I really hate it. So they are getting a lot of funding recently. We see the news about it all the time. I see like news reports saying that voice AI is the next big thing.
Yeah.
And my story is maybe going to talk about, is it really the next big thing, and what's actually going on with it, and why are they getting funded so much, and what are they actually doing? Also, can people really tell if an AI agent is talking to them or if it's a human? So let's
Yeah,
find
it's
out.
getting harder and harder to tell. But
Yep.
on that note, thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you again on Monday.
Daybreak is produced from the newsroom of The Ken, India's first subscriber-focused business news platform. What you're listening to is just a small sample of our subscriber-only offerings, and a full subscription offers daily, long-form feature stories, newsletters, and a whole bunch of premium podcasts. To subscribe, head to theken.com and click on the red subscribe button on the top of the website. Today's episode was hosted and produced by my colleague Snigdha Sharma and edited by Rajiv CN.